what is the most important role for the superintendent of education to play, and what separates you from the rest of this crowd?
Okay.
Few?
Well, the first priority for me will be to put an end to the Common Core standards. I've led the fight against the standards for the last year and a half, and we need to finish that job. And that will be up to the next superintendent of education, as it has been put in the hands of the next superintendent to rewrite the standards. And we will need to rewrite the standards in a way that doesn't just repackage them and relabel them the way the South Carolina science standards were done last year under the Zase-Childs administration. We need to be sure that we clearly rewrite the standards in a way that reflects South Carolina values and protects our American values. The Common Core standards were a classic example of the parents' voices being ignored in South Carolina. If I'm elected superintendent of education, for the first time in decades, parents will have a voice in the State Department of Education, and that's what sets me apart from the other candidates. I have proven that I can lead and make a difference for the parents in South Carolina, and that's why I am different from the other candidates.
Ms. Moff.
As you all know, a bill requiring the review of the Common Core education standards is on its way to becoming law. Since that bill does not guarantee the full repeal of Common Core, which some of you have called for, what would you do as superintendent of education to address your concerns about Common Core?
I will start with Ms. Few.
Well, as I stated earlier, I led the fight against the Common Core standards in South Carolina. And that's the reason I'm in this race, is because I see a lack of leadership in our state as I led the fight. It's been terribly disturbing to me that the parents in South Carolina and the taxpayers and many teachers' voices were ignored. And it was a difficult challenge. It was a challenge that many said we would never accomplish. So the bill that was passed was a huge victory for South Carolina parents and taxpayers and many teachers that were afraid to speak up. But the bill only puts it in the hands of the next superintendent of education to finish the job. It is up to the next superintendent of education to assure that the rewrite of the standards reflects South Carolina values. And as the next superintendent of education, I will assure that that happens. And I am the only candidate that really understands the failed philosophy behind the standards. And that's why I'm the one who will be sure that we don't end up like Indiana or Oklahoma or Arizona with Common Core under a different name.
Thank you, Ms.
If you ask school boards around the state, most of them will tell you that the legislature should fully fund the EFA-based student cost, which hasn't happened since before the recession. Many of them are looking at raising property taxes, they say, because of state mandates and inadequate state funding. What's your position on EFA funding, and is the state putting enough money in the K-12 system?
Well, I'm a solid believer that more money is not the solution for the problems in education. What we need to solve the problems in education is a voucher system in South Carolina. I plan, as the next superintendent of education, to champion the school choice issue in South Carolina. We are a conservative state with conservative leadership, and there's no excuse for why we don't have a school choice system in South Carolina. And I don't just say let money follow the child. I say we need a voucher system in South Carolina. Once we institute a voucher system, what will happen is we will allow the free market to drive solutions in education instead of government-driven solutions. And what happens when you have that is you will have competition. And competition will give us a better product for a better price. So if we want to do better in education and we want to do it for a less expensive cost, then a voucher system is the way to go for the solutions we need in South Carolina's education system.
It's a question that relates to funding, but it's as much philosophical, I think, as fiscal. It's been about 2 decades that the state of South Carolina has struggled to some degree with the concept of what is an adequate level of education. The General Assembly decided minimally adequate was a term that they could work with. The state Supreme Court has heard cases twice now and has yet to come up with a resolution or a decision as to what is the situation in regard to providing an adequate education. So my question really for all of you is, what is your definition of adequate, and what is the role of the state superintendent on this issue? Ms. Few?
Well, I have to say that I agree with Sally as far as I believe that students need access to excellent education, not adequate education. And I think that that will only happen once we finalize the job of ending Common Core. And you know, I have to take issue with some of the other candidates in their response to that question a few minutes ago, because I think based on the responses that I heard, they are not taking this issue seriously. Because if we don't stop Common Core, children, a whole generation of children could actually seriously be damaged because of the problems related with Common Core. This is an extremely serious issue. This is the reason that I am in this race, and that is why it is extremely important that the voters understand that not just any candidate can be trusted to rewrite the standards. When I appoint the writing team to rewrite the standards, I will direct them to rewrite the standards in a way that will reflect the time-honored tradition of a classical education. A classical education is aligned with a child's developmental learning stages, and that's what will give children an excellent education.
This morning, Governor Haley held a ceremony to sign into law a bill designating the Columbian mammoth as the official state fossil. The idea of naming a state fossil, which was raised by an 8-year-old student, stirred debate on the teaching of evolution and alternative theories on the origin of life, with some lawmakers attempting to insert biblical passages into the bill. What's your view on the state's science standards regarding evolution?
Ms. Few.
Well, I do not support the South Carolina science standards that were adopted last year. And in fact, the South Carolina science standards that were adopted last year are a disguised set of Common Core, next generation science standards that were pushed through illegally through our current administration. And that would be Dr. Zase through actually Sharmika Childs particularly. And in regard to the evolution issue, I have to say that that is one of the problems with our education system today, and it's one of the problems that has been brought to light through the problems with the Common Core standards, is that children are not receiving an objective education. There is plenty of science and research behind the theory of intelligent design, and yet it is not allowed in the classroom. There is no reason why the scientific theory of intelligent design should not be taught in the classroom alongside the theory of evolution. And that way children would receive an objective education, and they could also, for Christian children, could point to their God through the theory of intelligent design.
Thank you.
Children need to have an objective education in the public school classroom.
Thank you.
So the State Department of Education is in the process of rolling out a new teacher and educator evaluation system that considers, in part, how well students perform year to year. How much should educator evaluations be tied to student performance, and what would you do as State Superintendent of Education to retain and attract quality teachers to South Carolina schools?
Well, first of all, I don't believe that teacher evaluations should be tied to standardized tests, particularly the tests that will be aligned with the Common Core standards, because the Common Core standards, the children will not do well on any test that evaluates those standards. Obviously, it would not be fair to tie a teacher's performance to those faulty standards. In addition to that, I think that what has happened in public school classrooms is that the whole focus has become about the test. Teachers are teaching to test instead of teaching to children, and that has really hurt the entire education system. So I'm particularly opposed to standardized tests in general, and especially the federal ties to standardized tests, which most people don't understand has been a federal impediment for South Carolina for decades now. We are tied to federal standardized tests through the Title I funds, and it goes back to Republican leadership on the federal level. And it's time for us to stop allowing the federal government to control what's happened in South Carolina class.
Quick question that you'll each have about 20 seconds to answer. If you can do it in a tweet, that's about the right amount. In the past year, we've seen consolidation in the state government, adding some things to the governor's office. The state superintendent of education is an elected office, obviously. The question would be, should it remain that, or should it be an appointed office within the governor's? Ms. Few.
I believe that it should remain an elected position because it is such an important issue for South Carolina. It should have direct accountability to the parents and taxpayers of South Carolina. Nearly half the state budget goes to education. Taxpayers need that accountability, and I find it interesting that any candidate that's running should think that it should be an appointed position. I think that's a great farce.